So for the last couple of months on this channel, I have been in my self-proclaimed struggle era. Writing the end of 7th Virtue was a struggle. Writing Body Back was a lot of fun, but I didn't really actually film that. And then the end of it was a struggle. And then I started writing a book called Hallowed Bodies. It's technically a novella, and that was also a struggle. But the gods have ascended upon me and have given me some reprieve because I think, fingers crossed, I am out of my struggle era. Hallowed Bodies ended up working. So this, like I said, is a novella. It follows a guy named Lonan whose girlfriend who's gone traveling for a week, so he's home alone. Basically documents that week, particularly after a strange encounter drives him to look for his sister who has gone missing the previous months. Writing this book has been up and down. The first 2 weeks of July, like, it was a lot easier. I found the first chapter incredible to write. It was a fantastic experience. And then from there, things started to go downhill a little bit rapidly and a bit unexpectedly. But I will say I'm on chapter 5 now and things are going a lot better. Now the project itself is almost 9,000 words and my goal is 10,000 words, which means I'm about 1,000 words from finishing it. Now I don't think it's actually going to be that short. I think it's just going to be a touch longer, but I don't think that much longer, maybe 11 or 12,000 words. In the month of July, I wrote about 5,000 words, I think, for Camp NaNoWriMo. And in the last 2 days alone, I've literally written like 2,500 words. I have gone to really the meat of the book. The first third of it is like Lonan just chilling and like meandering really throughout the narrative, which is interesting and fun because we need to observe kind of how frustrating that has been for him to live such a boring everyday life. And then he runs like head first into something that is not boring and that is actually quite interesting. So he has this routine where he walks to a church every single day because that's just something he does as an ex-Catholic with religious trauma. He's just like me. So one day at the church, a man just starts talking to him like in the middle of mass and he's like, what the fuck? Like, first of all, the social anxiety of having somebody speak to you while everyone else is quiet and somebody else is talking. And second of all, he doesn't interact with people. And third of all, like, this is a stranger, so oh my god, that's kind of scary. For him, he doesn't like talking to people in this project, which is very relatable. But the man ends up speaking to him again when they leave the church and is basically like, hey, I've noticed you coming in and out of the library the last couple of days, which is what Lonan's doing in a couple of the other chapters. He says, I work at that library, and he ends up asking Lonan out for coffee. Now, I was having a really hard time with this character because I couldn't figure out his name. Now, I know his name, like, personally for me. I'm not gonna tell you what his name is because it doesn't matter anymore, so technically he doesn't have a name. In the meantime, before I decided to not call him a name at all, I had been calling him a specific name. But I recently read a really great book. I cannot remember the author's name. I'm terrible. It's so good. And something that was very interesting in that book, it follows a relationship between like a younger woman and an unnamed woman. The unnamed woman is just called the woman, like, throughout that book. And I had started reading it like right when I was at my wit's end with naming this character. And I was like, he's been fighting me every step of the way with his name. It makes so much sense that I just continue to call him the man, which makes sense because that's what I originally had been doing when I was sharing excerpts like on Tumblr. I wasn't actually sharing it with like his actual name. I was just sharing it as the man. So I've stuck with that, especially because this is such a compressed project. From then on, the project kind of has poured out of me. It's really quite interesting because Lonan like identifies with this person, because what I also did is I made them look physically similar, and I also made them have something in common. I have a new paragraph that I added. Let me see if I can read it. Things Lonan learns he has in common with the man. Left-handedness, dead mothers, scars on their right wrists, red as a favorite color, birthmarks on their backs, Russian grandmothers, having one ex, sensitive skin, a mild dust allergy, a girlfriend who's traveling, being born on the West Coast and raised in the East, a sun sensitivity, unmanageable eyebrows, double-jointed fingers, a healed fractured elbow from childhood, hooded eyes, black hair, blue eyes, dead fathers. This is like a first draft. I wanted to add more, but do you know how hard it is to think of like characteristics like off the top of your head. I liked this idea a lot. It was something that just came to me in the middle of drafting and I just injected it, and it created a bit of like a thematic anchor for me to use to drive the rest of the book, because if he feels that they have a similarity, he kind of instantly trusts this person, which is weird for Lonan, who doesn't trust anybody. I am currently in the middle of their shenanigans where this man is helping Lonan look for his sister, when in reality, neither of them are doing that. Poor Reeve. Honestly, justice for Reeve. I need to write Seventh Virtue again, because Reeve is my girl and she is just not getting the love and attention she deserves in the Mothwork series, which is where Hallowed Bodies comes from. Like, what is with all of these people using her to feel better about themselves? Like, you guys suck. All of them suck. Reeve is the best. Team Reeve. But basically, it's just kind of a thing in the background. It's a thing that brought them together, but it's not actually a thing that they're doing. So I'm working on, I think, what's gonna basically become the climax. I'm already like leading up to it. I've written so much of this project in solitary by myself, not really sharing a lot of it. This is kind of similar to how I wrote Seventh Virtue. I wrote Seventh Virtue quite isolated too, like for 200,000 words, particularly like the first 100,000 words. The latter half, me and my sister were like really invested in Seventh Virtue. And I also started sharing more of it in vlogs, like for NaNoWriMo. For something like Body Back, I was sharing a lot of it online, on Tumblr, not on YouTube, but on Tumblr. And so like I was kind of used to having like a little like community, like a little village behind that book, but I have not shared a lot about Hallowed Bodies because I don't know why. I think it's just a very different process that it's just kind of contained in me, which is something that's really interesting because I had really kind of started to crave that again. Like after Body Back, toward the end, I was like, oh man, I kind of like wonder what it was like how did I go a year, like over a year, writing Seventh Virtue without talking to anybody about it. Like it was literally just in my head and I didn't really think anything else of it. And I really enjoyed having a lot of community for Body Back. I haven't shared a lot of this book anywhere, whereas with Body Back, like most of that is like published online, at least like the first 3 chapters. Like if you want to read nearly the entire 3rd chapter, it's on my blog, and I already published the first chapter of Body Back on my YouTube channel. Something that's really interesting to me that I've always thought about, because I am an author-tuber, because I do have like an online following, which isn't something that like I set out wanting to do. Like I never started a Tumblr or YouTube for the purpose of sharing my writing. And even when I was like pretty transparent about my writing, I never like shared as much as I have like at this point. But something that's interesting to me is thinking about community as writers, because it can kind of be tough. Even though I got a degree in writing and I met a lot of great writers, it's still pretty hard to find people that you can just kind of send writing to all the time. I do love sharing my work online. I love talking about it now. I have accidentally cultivated like a mini fandom, I think, for the fostered characters, which is really cool to me. Like I think I did that by accident. I guess I just started talking about them a lot and people got to know them, which I really appreciate. So I think that's really cool. But there are some things where it's like, it's nice to have like a little project that a lot of people don't know a lot about, which is so different to Body Back. But also Body Back was like very exciting and new for me. Hallowed Bodies is like boring. I've already said that many times, but at this point it's getting a lot more interesting, but it was boring for the longest time. Hi, so it has been a couple of days. Every single time I do my bangs like this, it's supposed to look cool, but then I end up looking like a poodle. Like, I don't, anyway. So my book is going pretty well. I did like maybe mildly jinx myself. It was going pretty well, I should say. I wrote quite a bit the other day, just in the moments between Lonan and this guy. I am really liking their interactions. But then I did the cardinal sin. A cardinal sin occurred and I finished my scene and went to bed. And I always tell myself never to do that because it's gonna be so much harder to start a scene the next day. And it was. I wasn't really feeling very invested in what I was writing. I wrote this on the stream if you were on the live stream for 8K. I just wasn't feeling what I was writing. So I kind of like bullshitted past the beginning so I could actually get to like the more interesting part. So I want to just reread what I wrote in this particular chapter. This is chapter 6. And then I'll get into like the actual juicy tea of the scene, because the rest of this book is going to be a lot more interesting. And I'm almost done and I'm just kind of itching to finish it. Not that I like want to. I don't really have an emotional connection to this project in comparison to Body Back. Like Hallowed Bodies, I don't know why. I just don't feel emotionally at all connected to it. It could be because my life is very boring right now. Like I'm not moving to school. I am not coming back from school. I am not graduating anymore. You know, like my life is very stagnant right now. I'm not working because of chronic pains. So it's like, I don't know, like every day is just the same, so it doesn't feel that interesting to me. You know, Body Back was like an era project for me. Seventh Virtue was an era project for me. Hallowed Bodies is just like the actual project is normal core. The actual writing process is very normal core, so it's uninteresting. And I don't know if I like the idea that I thrive when my like writing process is dramatic for some reason, but I guess I do. And this book isn't that. But I've come to terms with that, and actually it's getting a lot more interesting now. So essentially what's happening in this scene is the guy that Lonan is interacting with, they've got a really weird dynamic going on. I don't know what's wrong with them. His car breaks down and he's hungry, so can he come back to Lonan's house and just hang out with him? That doesn't sound like a logical conclusion of events if your car breaks down, but I mean, you're catching my drift. They're gonna hang out a little bit. The whole purpose of their relationship is to look for Reeve. They're not doing that. So thanks so much, guys. Like, justice for Reeve. So it's been a couple days since I last updated this vlog. Writing has been going like mid. I kind of got stuck in Hallowed Bodies and I don't really know why. It's just kind of like one of those things where I got into a flow state and then the minute it kind of gave me some resistance, I was just like flung right out. But I'm feeling better about the project in general and not calling it boring all the time now, which is good. In the last clip, I did a ton of work. I essentially added like a couple hundred words doing some revisions. So I tweaked everything that was kind of bugging me about the project, or at least the last couple of chapters that I'd written. Then I started writing the new scene. The scene itself is kind of lacking tension, or I wasn't sure like the direction it's supposed to go. That's really like my big problem with it, is like, obviously I didn't plan it. Oh, Panther has no idea what's supposed to happen in her book. But basically I am a little bit confused about like the direction that I want to take the scene, but I have very strong vibes for it. And also I'm not sure if it's gonna repeat. It might be like one of those Body Back moments where the same scene keeps happening over and over and over again, and I'm not sure if I want that. Really, what I'm saying is I need to get onto my document and actually draft, because I can't figure it out. Even when I'm like sitting down in notes, I just can't figure it out. The project is over 10,000 words now. It took me a little bit longer than projected to hit that word count, like, you know, a week and a half, because I had hoped to write 10,000 words in that month. So it wasn't so bad, honestly. Like, I'm really pleased with that. I've been watching a lot of movies, though. I'm in my movie era, which is good because I have been very tired. And when I get tired, I know that I probably should, you know, not sit at my computer and stress myself out. So I have a very like autistic goal, which is to watch all the movies that are referenced in Current Joys and like Surf Curse songs. That has been fun. I started with My Own Private Idaho, which was so good. Like, it blew my mind. It was fantastic. Like, it was also bad, but also like really good. Anyways, so I really liked it. But it was very vibey, like similar vibes. I didn't know what it was about. There's a Current Joys song that uses like a good chunk of that movie is like the intro. So I've been like listening to like the end of that movie unknowingly for like the last 6 years. Well, that's how I knew it was this movie, but I never watched it. I had no idea what it was about, and it would have been great to watch when I was writing Feeding Habits and struggling writing Feeding Habits, especially the Harrison point of view chapters, because like the internal conflicts are very similar between the main character of that movie and Harrison and Mothers. And then yesterday I watched Tom at the Farm, which was so good. Set in rural Montreal, Quebec. I didn't realize that it was a French-Canadian film, so I really liked it. The vibes were surprisingly a lot like Hallowed Bodies. I did not realize that we were gonna get like identical vibes because a lot of the scenes are similar. I'm like, what am I doing to Lonan? So I'm going to do a little drafting. I have to go to physio today though, so I'm gonna leave the house a little bit earlier. So I'm gonna try to get some drafting in. I did some freelance editing yesterday. If you didn't know, I do edit freelance. So if you want to work with me, I will link my editing services. In the last clip, I had gone on to draft like a really tough scene that I actually didn't see coming. Like I wasn't expecting it, like tough in terms of content. And it like really made me have empathy for Lonan. I love him so much, but I also have gotten into the habit of making fun of him a lot since I started writing in Harrison's point of view a lot more frequently. Probably makes sense, seeming as though Harrison simultaneously loathes and loves that man. But the last time I felt like deeply and genuinely empathetic to Lonan was like 2020. And then I wrote the scene and I was like, oh, like, oh God, you poor thing. Like, what am I doing to you? I felt really sad for him. It's all my fault, but it was... it was real sad. So I really want to get past what's bugging me. I think the best thing that I can do when I'm stuck is just to push through it, because I have been like dilly-dallying with this for like the last 2-3 days and I'm kind of sick and tired of it. I just want to like get out of this like tough part and get to a part that makes me excited, because this dynamic makes me excited between Lonan and this unnamed mystery man. Like it does excite me and interests me a lot, but when I get stuck in this project, for some reason I'm getting really stuck. Lonan's voice, it just might be his voice is the problem, because I remember writing the first chapter in his point of view in Mothwork. It started off really well and then it got really difficult. Like his point of view got really difficult to write. And then in Feeding Habits, the same thing. Like the first chapter was much easier and then the rest was like extremely difficult. It was like pulling teeth. Same thing here. I think it's just kind of hard to get into his brain because he doesn't really think about things that much. Whereas like Harrison's like very overt in his narrative. So it's kind of hard when you don't really know what the plot of the story is, then to also like understand like what is Lonan thinking if I don't even know what's happening. Writing, girl, it's not that it's been going bad. It's been going like fine, and I've been like relatively consistent, more consistent than I have been in the past with Hallowed Bodies, so that's like a pretty good thing. But also I am like kidding myself into believing that I'm not bored out of my mind when writing this book. It is still boring. Like I think I'm getting to parts where it's not as boring. It is still boring, and it doesn't mean like that the book is boring. It's just like for some reason like it's boring to me, like to write it. With that said, last night I did do a teeny tiny bit of drafting. It really wasn't much. It felt like I was writing all day because I was, and I don't know how much I added. It was probably like 300 or 400 words. So today I did do one single writing sprint. It was 15 minutes long and I wrote about 300 words. So the manuscript is at like almost 11.5K. So it's longer than anticipated. I mean, it's 1.5K over what I anticipated, and it will be a little bit longer. But the thing is, I'm like very indecisive about this one scene and I can't tell what I want to do with it. I mentioned in the last clip, and I still can't tell. Like I have been writing through it and I'm still like confused. Now I wrote, like I said, I did a sprint and I don't know if I like anything that I wrote in the sprint, but I had to kind of like go back to the basics, like when I was writing Feeding Habits, and like remind myself like, it's okay if it sucks, like you can like fix it later or work on it later. It's okay if it sucks, you can fix it or work on it later, over and over and over and over again. That kind of helped because allowed me just to push through. I was like, you know what? I don't care what happens right now. I just want to write for 15 minutes, which like I have all the time like in a day basically at the moment. So you would think that I would be able to do that a lot more. It's just like not happening. So I did write about 300 words in that sprint, which is a lot. Like for 15 minutes for this type of book, literary fiction, like wow, that is a lot more than I thought. Lonan and this guy are kind of like, surprisingly, they got into a bit of an argument and I don't know if it works. Like I'm very confused about like the flow of this project so far. I don't know if the flow works because it feels like I've been writing it for 20 million years. Like, so even a scene that I wrote literally last week, it feels like I wrote it so much longer ago. So I'm like very disjointed in terms of how everything's flowing into the other, whether or not the pacing is correct. So I'm gonna reread what I did write. It's 8:46 p.m. I have been trying to watch a movie every single night because, first of all, I really need inspo for Hallowed Bodies. I'm watching a lot of queer cinema, so if you have recommendations, let me know your favorites. So I have been doing this for like, I don't know, the last 2 weeks, trying to watch movies a lot more, but now I'm like really trying to get one every single night, which I am able to. The only issue is that I haven't started writing yet, and like I'm trying to go to bed at a reasonable time, but because I'm not, I keep staying up really late. So I'm on chapter 7. I did finish chapter 6. I just started chapter 7, and like, I don't know. The chapter titles, I've added a couple. So now in total we have Holy Ground, Haunted Face, Cold Collar, Twin Stranger, which like I'm not sold on. I wanted it to be Same Face, but I already have Haunted Face. So if I can find a better title for Haunted Face, I will change this one to Same Face. Living Apparition, and then Lost Heaven, and now I'm on chapter 7. So we'll see what it ends up being named. It's really vibes. I am losing my mind a little bit writing this project because it is so like boring. Listen, I know Microsoft Liam is just a robot. I'm reading Hallowed Bodies if that's not clear. But you need to hear the performance of this line.
The man smiles again. There's something artificial about his teeth. Bleached. Veneers? When he takes a step closer, Lonan's certain they're all the same size.
Did you hear that? Veneers? He said veneer?
Over in Americano, Lonan confesses everything, which might be a premature decision, but it's 91 degrees out, and because he didn't order something iced, he's sweating through his button-up, which makes him self-conscious and therefore overcompensatingly honest. And in any regard, the man's eyes are sparkly like cubic zirconia, which might be the sole reason he's talking at all.
Surfing. I was feeling kind of annoyed with the draft, and I realized it's because I have not listened to Microsoft Liam read it to me. I've been reading it with my own eyes. So much better. Hi guys. I have just finished crying, but I wanted to update this vlog because it's been a couple of days. I was just crying about, you know, chronic pain. Today, I did a lot of writing, but surprisingly, not for Hallowed Bodies. Midway through, like, jump scare, there's a new book all of a sudden. Basically, I surprised myself by writing a new project. I had an idea for a short story, or maybe it'll be like a shorter novella, but probably a short story. Also in the Foster universe that follows Jeremiah, who, if you don't know anything, Jeremiah is part of the series Harrison from Body Back and all of the other books. He is Harrison's kind of like boyfriend in that period of his life. So in Body Back in particular, he plays a really big role. So I wanted to see if I could give him some spotlight because I love him so much as a character, and I found myself really missing him. I kind of just really impulsively a couple weeks ago came up with this idea while I was writing Hallowed Bodies, and Hallowed Bodies has been really annoying the last couple of days, like, to be honest. It has been tricky in deeply unsettling ways. Right as I think like, oh, it's actually going really well, it like starts going really bad. It's kind of like unpredictable at this point. I'm like almost at the end though. It's like 13,000 words long, so it's quite long. So anyway, I've been working on this project with Jeremiah like in the meantime. So the last 2 days I've devoted to that instead of Hallowed Bodies. So I'm currently at like almost 2,000 words in the draft. Like, it's writing so much faster than Hallowed Bodies, probably because Lonan is such a boring narrator in Hallowed Bodies. It's like, you are like a piece of paper in terms of how interesting he is. Like, I love that man, but oh my god, Lonan is so boring in Hallowed Bodies. I can't handle it. Like, dude, you're doing nothing. It's giving no energy at all. But Jeremiah, on the other hand, is heartbroken. In the book or story, I'm calling it Changing States, he has just broken up with Harrison. He's like left him or whatever at the end of Body Back. That's how it ends. Harrison ends up waking up on a, like in a field, and Jeremiah's there, and Jeremiah's friend Bu is like, dude, like, you gotta let him go, you gotta cut him loose, like, you have to live your life. And so Jeremiah does, and now this is him kind of struggling after that break up a little bit, because lo and behold, like, he actually cared about Harrison. Like, that disaster man, he actually really loved him. Harrison did not love him in return, even though he was trying to, and that was a big conflict in Body Back. The log line is as follows. Let me see if I can find it. After a whirlwind romance devastatingly ends, Jeremiah moves back to his hometown in Maryland for support, only to receive word there's been a death in the family the day he's said to arrive. A plotless vibes story, but also with this undercurrent of grief. So it's kind of autofiction-y. I've mentioned this on Tumblr a little bit. It's loosely, very, very loosely based off of something that I went through. Well, what's it like to have pre-established plans to go to a place, especially it's a place that means a lot to you. In this case, it's Jeremiah's home. It's like where he's from. What's it mean to take a trip like that, and then before you get to the trip, somebody dies? I thought it was an interesting thing to like navigate, especially like because it is very loosely autofiction-y, and I love Jeremiah so much. He's a fantastic, fantastic narrator. I'm just gonna reread what I wrote today. It was, like I said, a little bit over 1,000 words, which is like a lot. To be fair, it was kind of because I had written a lot of it already. So something I'm trying to remind myself to do more often is write in my notes app. So like I used to write a lot of ideas down on my phone. I have a video talking about how I organize my notes and ideas. But when I was writing like Mothwork originally, like I would get so many ideas for scenes and I would write them down, and a lot of the scenes that ended up in the book, a lot of the lines, like the final lines, they were from these like notes app scenes. So yesterday I was distressed. I'm laughing, but it wasn't funny. It was horrible. I was very upset about my chronic pain, and I was hysterically crying. To calm myself down and to make myself feel better, I started writing on my phone, and that actually helped like tremendously. So I'm just trying to like, you know, connect to the things that I actually can control in my life. And so a lot of the writing today like just jumped off of that. So Jeremiah, currently the plot is that he is driving from Las Vegas to Baltimore, and it's a really long trip. He's just making it himself. And so he's just stopped off at a motel. And what's really interesting about this is that I mirrored a scene from Mothwork. So Mothwork, which is like the parent book, like the mother book of many of the books that I've been talking about, but there's a scene where Harrison, who's the narrator of Mothwork, meets Jeremiah, and Jeremiah works at a motel in Las Vegas or near Las Vegas. It's really cool because it was the first time I'd ever really written Harrison like actively flirting with somebody and like enjoying flirting with somebody, flirting with a man in particular. I hadn't written that before, and it was like a really like wonderful experience for me to learn about his character. So the moment with Jeremiah always like stuck with me because it was like a first for me. It was exciting. So what I did in Changing States, I almost forgot the title, I mirrored that scene. So now Jeremiah is the one going into a motel. So it's really neat because I get to basically like parallel this thing that happened. Like the last time that a similar thing happened to Jeremiah, he was the one behind the counter. He was the one, you know, talking to this guy who mattered to him, and now he has no contact with because Harrison is a disaster that he breaks up with. That was cute because I was able to like revisit the book and like reference it and everything. So I'm feeling good about this project. I know this happens. I'm like nervous that it's gonna happen to this project because it happened to Hallowed Bodies, where like the first 1,700, 1,800 words was like so easy and I really loved it. And then after that point, it became like really hard. And I'm not looking forward to that. This is going to be a much shorter project than Hallowed Bodies in general. Say hello for me and Will Graham. Writing has been going, you know, quite well. Like I have personally been going through, like, if it's not obvious or in this video, a difficult time. And writing has actually been quite useful in kind of being like a little bit of a coping mechanism. Like I think, you know, I'm a little bit at the end of my rope in terms of like dealing with everything. And so it has been a relief actually to be able to write and enjoy it. So I'm still working on Changing States, and I'm also still working on Hallowed Bodies. I really want to finish Hallowed Bodies by the end of the month. Hopefully the next vlog, I'll be like, I'm done. I've been going on a lot of walks because I need to be constantly moving. If not, my body thinks that it's dying. On those walks, I do a lot of like thinking and brainstorming because I'll just listen to music. So I did come up with quite a few ideas for Changing States, which is Jeremiah's book / story. I have no idea what it's gonna end up being. It's already like 3,000 words and nothing has happened. Like I always worry, like, how am I gonna write a novel that's like long enough? Girl, you can't even write to the plot in 3,000 words. This is supposed to be 5,000 words and I'm nowhere near that. But in terms of Hallowed Bodies, count how many times I called this book boring. About an hour ago, I came up with like an idea that I think might fix the problem. Went down the wrong path, like in terms of like the emotional arc. Like I'd messed up the momentum of a scene because I took it like in too intense of a direction. If you want to stay more up to date with these excerpts, you are welcome to jump down the trapdoor into my chaotic space on Tumblr. Just warning you, it is chaotic over there. But this is the opening paragraph, which I've shared a lot over there, so sorry if you have already read this a million times. On the evening Jeremiah decides he'll drive 30 hours to Maryland, the other half of his mattress is cold and Madonna's on the radio. In his bedroom, he taps his cigarette on the windowsill, the ash scattering into rainy blue hour, and listens. Time goes by so slowly, she goes, her voice singed through his boombox's broken speakers. He's meant to replace it. Though he's meant to do a lot of things: check the mail, make a quiche, buy light bulbs, call his sister, take up cross-stitch, recycle an olive jar, move his bed to the opposite side of his room. But time goes by so slowly, and Jeremiah would know. He's 21, yet feels he's been alive for much, much longer. I have a really silly goal to finish all of the 21 project before I turn 22. So my birthday's on September 27th, so it's literally in just about a month now. Oh god. And so I kind of want to be in my 22 era when I'm writing, because like I made 21 my entire personality, like in terms of my writing for like the last year. So I'm like, I can't be writing anymore like in 21 if I'm 22, which is really dumb, but it's just something I've been thinking about. And then here's one more about Harrison, because the Harrison cult, I asked in my last video, many people said I'm part of the Harrison cult, so you want to hear what he's doing? He's breaking people's hearts. The anti-Harrison cult, when everybody wants to enact revenge on that man for hurting Jeremiah. Jeremiah hasn't prayed since September. Every morning he tries to read a passage of the Bible or pray the rosary, but something has tainted these acts. When he was a child, he turned to God for everything: love, comfort, advice, whatever he wanted. He'd been so excited for his confirmation that he spoke about it more than he did his 21st birthday party. But this is different. He's fallen into something by mistake. A man with butterfly eyelashes and downy hair. A man who sings Cher's Believe so loud on karaoke night, other patrons complain. A man who dreams of moving to New York's countryside in a farmhouse where he can, of all things, split firewood. He likes the idea of wielding an axe, loves the scent of newly felled poplar. A man who wants to start painting his nails red. A man who'll quote Whitney's "I want to dance with somebody" anytime you don't want to dance. A man who will only eat pecan pie if there's whipped cream on it. A man who thinks the worst way to drink coffee is to not drink it at all. A man whose smile is like a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls on his worst days and like a luminous painting of the Golden Coast on his best. A man he held so tight he blinked and forgot a part of himself there. Moment of silence is so sad. So if it's not clear, he's thinking about Harrison. It's interesting because a character trait about Jeremiah that surprised Harrison back in Feeding Habits, like back in 2021 when I wrote this part, is that Jeremiah is a Catholic. And so I have been like kind of thinking about how faith impacts how he navigates the world as somebody who grew up a Catholic. It's really quite interesting. He's a really nice narrator. If it's not clear, like there's something sprawling and like artistic about his voice that I love. Harrison's a little rough around the edges. Lonan's boring. We already know that. But Jeremiah, Jeremiah's like, why didn't I write tons of books in his point of view this whole time? Because he's really interesting. So that's going to be basically the end of this video. Let me know what you're working on in the comments, and I will see you in another one. Bye.